Hi, and welcome to Academic Compliance Academy. In this video, I'm going to talk about fairy tales and compliance. Because I got a really good question from one of my old friends asking how could we teach young people about compliance or risk-based compliance? And my initial answer was that they kind of already know. Because children are probably the best and most responsive audience or people in general to understand compliance. And why is that? Because they were brought up listening to fairy tales. And it might seem a bit weird that fairy tales could have anything to do with compliance. But fairy tales are typically based on an adventure. We have a main character, and there are some moral or ethical dilemmas that this character goes through and have to deal with to find a solution and alignment with their own behavior in accordance to the surroundings. So let's just for fun look at a classic build-up. So I put out here some specific alignments or specific points in a fairy tale. So every fairy tale has to start, it might start very pretty, blah, 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 blah. The sun is out, everything is good. But the first thing that has to happen is a trigger. There will be a trigger that will try to unbalance this perfect scenario. So once upon a time, you're already good. The trigger comes, someone will die, very Disney. Someone will be kidnapped. It might be Little Red Riding Hood. Grandma's gone. Something happens. A risk appears. A risk is identified. Something is happening here that is not good. So what happens after we discovered that something bad has happened? Well, we just have to reflect and see, okay, how bad is this? Well, Mufasa dies in The Lion King, and suddenly Scar wants to take over and manipulate the whole thing, and he even blames Simba. So the scale is quite big because the whole kingdom is under threat. And that might be too much to comprehend. So what does Simba do? As any character in a fairy tale, they go on a journey. In Disney, you would always have like a tune, a song, a journey song, trying to really go out in a musical way and reflect on the inner development and involvement that happens in this character. But in any fairy tale, we will have some journey because our main character needs to learn and they need to understand and grasp what is really happening. And this is the risk analysis. It is compliance analysis. We're looking at the risk and we're analyzing it from a compliance perspective, trying to see the broader picture and trying to put ourselves in accordance. But we need some distance, and that is why we call it the journey, because they tend to go out in the world to try to grow up in some sense. Then comes the alignment. You might find your grandmother. You might be convinced that Hakuna Matata is the best thing in the world, or that your magical power actually isn't that bad. And this is the alignment. This is compliance. You look at your core values and suddenly what maybe triggered everything was not that bad, because now the journey, the analysis, the whole compliance assessment, the involvement of your own characteristics now makes sense in accordance to your surroundings. And what do you do then? Well, this is the mitigation part. You act on it. You take back your kingdom. You do something. You save your grandmother. You do action. And what is that? Action equals mitigation. Compliance mitigation. So there are similarities between fairy tales and compliance. And of course, we will have a happy, sometimes unhappy ending. Well, that is just the whole monitoring process where we actually just wait for something else to happen and see, can we do a sequel? But looking at this, our children already know. And if you go back, I even had scholars looking at me saying, I don't understand this compliance, I don't understand risk. And I even had to like bring up an example. Well, look at a fairy tale, because sometimes I know that the real world is more complex, and that is the exercise that we need to, of course, scholar people in. That complexity just enhances. But in basic, we all know what compliance is, because compliance is aligning your core values with the surroundings, with the regulation, with society, with the expectations, given the risk picture you are set in and that is in your surroundings. So this was just a small Q&A, my take on how do we teach young people about compliance and how big an impact fairy tales actually has when we talk about compliance. So stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, and let's talk more about compliance.